revenue. So as we get closer to the end of the year, and as these things become more stable for this year, I'll have a better idea of what to include for next year. Again, we're looking at this as a worst-case scenario. That would be an increase in revenues to us. This budget does include an approval of the hold harmless homestead millage that we talked about earlier, the value of about $2.1 million. With the loss, a reduction of 200 FTEs from our student population, this budget does include a reduction of staff by 7 teaching staff. It includes an increase in costs for insurance, health insurance, of about 10%. That equates to about $500,000. This budget includes a retirement rate at 27.37%. That's increased from 24.46%, about $200,000 increased expenditure to the district. It does include a line item for $180,000 for technology replacement computers at the elementary schools. That's the only part of the computer replacement plan that the district has not moved forward with. All the other computers in the district have been replaced over the last several years. It does include a state aid loan of about $50,000 for next year. It does not include any of the 3 T's that we've talked about in the past. Transportation, it does not include purchasing any new buses to replace obsolete fleet. It does not include additional curriculum purchases, and it does not include, we've talked about it a little bit, but some of our furniture in the district is also getting very obsolete and old, and we've had some requests that have to be denied at this point for purchasing. Some of the other things that I'm still working on, especially with the city, is the General Motors abatement. It doesn't necessarily affect the general fund budget, but when we start talking about the debt, it will affect debt. Once the city, I think they've already approved the abatement. I'm just waiting to find out exactly when that begins. I have a call into the city from last week. This budget also, you've heard with the governor's plan, there were some additional achievement payouts. None of those dollars have been included in this because that'll just have to have more discussion with the administrative team here and obviously the board to see where we fit within those payouts. And that is about it. I think I've covered the main items that we usually talk about.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you. Sherry, the state aid loan, is that for cash flow or because of the bond?
That is cash flow. Bonds, we'll talk about at a future date.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Papazoglu, with the, trying to remember, you just stated a number with the information from the governor in regards to the money that he's going to award. Would that be like a grant process that we would have to apply for, or is it just, you know, data?
It is part of best practices.
Okay.
Carl and I talked about it a little bit. I see it as competitive. I think he sees it as a little bit competitive as well.
Well, there's 2 pieces. There's $75 per student,
Right.
Which is basically very similar to the way we received $100 this year. And then there's $100 per student that we may be eligible for based on student achievement gains. All right.
And reading
They have
and-
not defined what those gains will be yet, but I know it's covering grades 3 through 8. So it's going to be one of those things, if we meet that threshold, we'll get the $100 per student. If we don't, we won't. I don't think it's a graduated, but the details of that are very sketchy at this point.
The House Fiscal Agency was at the last MASB Government Relations Committee, and they presented the proposal because they knew it was coming. And it didn't come across as being competitive per se. It's just going to be, you know, whatever benchmark they use for your MEP scores, whether they use 2010, whether they use 2011. If there's an increase or a trend, then again, you know, districts would qualify for it. It's either, you know, it's an all or nothing proposition. So, you know, again, over reliance on standardized testing, but
Exactly.
I won't rant there.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay,
I want to get into, there's more to this though.
go ahead.
Okay, the next item, and you have a handout, and in front of you, titled Capital Outlay History.
Actually, I didn't get one.
It should be behind it.
It's a one-page.
You sure it wasn't up here and all that stuff?
No, that's Sandy's stuff. I didn't get
You
one.
need one?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I don't know, I might have closed you out of there, Carl.
Think of them sheets of paper we're
Sorry,
using a year.
that was my fault. I didn't know you were gonna do.
Sheets of paper, we 17,000.
Okay, again, just reviewing the board's financial priorities, and you could, at any time, you could make a change in these. We debated, I remember, 3 and 4 in terms of whether those were in the right order or not, but preserving our K-12 instructional program was the top priority. Maintaining our physical facilities, including transportation, was the second one. Building fund balance in accordance with MSBO recommendations, which is between 5 and 15% of our operating budget.
Yes.
And of course, we're nowhere close to that right now, and neither are most of our peer districts. And then finally, keeping school taxes low, which we've managed to do through the years, sometimes willingly and sometimes by force, just depending on the situation. But moving down, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that the board understood was issues that I kind of collectively lump as capital outlay items. These are big ticket expenditures, and in some cases we've been pretty diligent about keeping up with these things, but in the last couple of years, because money has been so short, the board has chosen to preserve our K-12 instructional program at the expense of some of these capital outlay items. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of a general term, facility upkeep, and I'm going to work across the top. All right.
Can you use the
Can you
mic?
use the mic?
Oh, sure. Actually, you know what? I think I'll just sit here. 'Cause
Okay.
we'll get it.
I can point.
Okay, looking at facility upkeep, what we're looking at are 2 rows across. All right, the top row is money that we've taken from our sinking fund, and you can see in 2007 and 2008, we really didn't use the sinking fund because we didn't have one. It was approved by voters in 2008. That story was mostly roofs and a little bit of concrete and parking lot work. So you see that in 2009, a little over $1 million, and 2010, a little bit less than that. Those were basically the roofing jobs and, like I say, some concrete work and a little bit of blacktop at some of the buildings as well. And that was the lion's share of that. Our projection for next year, and this is more of a wish list. This isn't a mandate, but the administrative recommendation would be to spend about $850,000 next year. That would include new fire alarm systems for all the buildings. All right, and we've discussed the high school one. That's the most urgent one, and also the most expensive because of the size of the building. So that would include that. The elementaries are about $55,000 a crack for those. The high school, I think, was around $300 and some thousand.
About $275,000.
Okay, and the middle school is in between those two. And then the other thing that we really want to start working on interior-wise in our buildings are floor coverings. We've replaced some of the tile floors in the buildings. We've gotten rid of the ratty old lumpy, dumpy carpeting in many of the hallways, and that's really cleaned up the entranceways in some of the buildings, but we need to do more of that. I didn't build in anything for new carpet just because of the fact that it's a lot more expensive. And again, the board can parcel this out, but we're going to need to start doing some things with some of the classrooms, or the carpet's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And it's about the sinking fund stipulates, and you, by the way, you do have a copy of the most recent update of the sinking fund. If you want to look by building, you certainly can. It goes by building, and you can see that flooring is around $10,000 a year, or $10,000 per building. You can get that either? Nothing
You can get
personal.
the whole packet. that
Nope.
way.
Here's an extra.
While you're passing that out, I thought we exhausted the amount of money in the sinking fund.
We have, and that's why I said that this is a wish list. We have money for the, okay, we have money for the fire alarm at the high school, and that's about it, right?
Because it seemed to me that the last conversation we had about 400,000.
Yep,
Yep.
that's correct, okay.
So this is taking an assumption that we're gonna be able to levy
This is just what we would like to spend if we had it. All right. The next row under facility upkeep is the impact on the general fund from 2007 all the way through, and you can see that this would be, you know, maintenance items, chillers that we replaced, other issues like that, and we used to budget about $500,000 a year for the maintenance department for facilities upkeep, and last year I think we cut it to $400,000, didn't we?
Yeah.
So I just left that in there. And so you can see the trend between the general fund and the sinking fund. All right. Next row, transportation. One of the things that that we started in 2007 was school bus purchases because the fleet had been ignored for I don't want to say ignored, but we didn't buy any new buses for several years before that, and we knew that we needed to. So we bought 5 or 6 buses a year for 3 years running, 07, 08, and 09, and you see the bills for those. Then the last 2 years, 10, 11, and 11, 12, we budgeted 0, and I know that we've made you aware of some of the issues. The transportation department is recommending that we purchase, if we have the money, 5 big school buses, 65 passenger buses, and 2 handicap accessible buses for next year. So that would be their wish list, and that's where the $500,000. And again, those projections are big round numbers. They're not. We haven't put that out for bid or anything close to that yet. Sherry already mentioned to you the next row, technology. Our plan was to replace all of the computers that teachers touch and that students touch. Our original plan was to do that within 3 years. As money got tight, we've gotten a little bit behind on that. You can see in 08 we did a good job, in 09, and in 2010 most of that $120,000 I don't think went for computers. I think it went for
Infrastructure,
It was
switches and
Yeah.
stuff.
infrastructure.
Yep, okay. I'm told that $180,000 for next year, again, if we have it, would enable us to replace basically the computers in the elementary kayak labs and the media centers, all those computers, and they are overdue for replacement. What's starting to happen at the elementary level is we're running out of, we cannibalized all the ones that we replaced, you know, at the high school and the middle school, because spare parts otherwise aren't always available, and we are now running out of spare parts. So we would really like to make that a priority. Keep in mind that one of the things that in the budget reduction plan for this year that the board agreed to was to kind of ping pong between technology and curriculum money. So this year, and if you look at the next row across curriculum, you can see that curriculum got $161,000 and technology got 0. So we're saying next year it would be technology's turn and curriculum would get 0. Keep in mind that we're still paying, that's really textbook money that we're talking about. That's not every nickel. We're not saying that we wouldn't spend any money at all on curriculum. So for example, the MAP tests that we've been giving and sharing with you that are so important now to monitoring our student achievement and helping kids stay on task. Those run, I think, what was it, $44,000 a year?
This year it's 37,000. Our estimated next year is like 39,000.
And our plan is to continue with those tests. Very, very important part of our academic achievement goal. Next, Sherry talked to you a little bit about furniture. Again, this is one of the things that we've always wanted to see as an annual line item. Districts that have good financial plans spend X number of dollars a year. They say, hey, we're going to replace 3 classrooms a year or 10 classrooms a year. Pick a number, and that's the money that we'll devote. We haven't been doing that lately. We've been doing some, a little bit here and there. Most recent purchase for this year was the cafeteria furniture
In the high school?
Yes.
at the high school.
That came out of the cafeteria.
did.
Cafeteria
Right.
fund, yes. Yeah, and I apologize, that's listed as a general fund, but it really is cafeteria fund. And again, we would, if our wish list would be to start, you know, at around $50,000 a year to start replacing classroom furniture. If you've noticed, at some of the meetings and convocations in the high school media center and the middle school media center, the chairs are getting pretty ratty. The upholstery is wearing thin. You can see the foam poking through, and So it is an area of concern. The tables are in very good shape, but the chairs definitely need some, need to be